You won the toss. We didn't really actually toss, but we both agreed you can do this. You go first. Your opening remarks.
Thank you, Piers, for having me, and Candace, thank you for debating me. I have spent my life bringing together the Black and Jewish communities, emphasizing that we share not only a history of shared persecution, but of spiritual promise. Today we debate an American tragedy, a woman of unique eloquence who has abused that eloquence to become simultaneously the foremost anti-Black rhetorician in all of the United States and the foremost anti-Semite in America. The statements that Candace has made against her own community, that they cry wolf and constantly say that they're victims of racism. Her attacks on George Floyd, a man who was suffocated to death for a $20 counterfeit note saying that he was a horrible human being. A woman who went up in front of CPAC and said, "I was never a slave in America," as if that's the only form of discrimination, is what has led her community to call her not Candace, but Clandis. The first ever female Black woman who appears in her rhetoric against Blacks, calling LeBron James dumb and stupid, an icon to the Black community, as Clandis. Simultaneously, you have the Jewish community beginning to call her not Candace Owens, but Candace Ovens, because her Goebbels-style rhetoric against Jews, that Jews are nearly all pedophiles. The State of Israel will set up a Theodor Herzl, a pedophile, as a haven for pedophiles, that Judaism is a demonic, satanic cult that only protects pedophiles. And by the way, her absolute obsession with Jewish sexuality and Jewish genitalia, the first lady of France, Brigitte Macron's genitalia, is disturbing. It's one of the reasons I think she hates Sigmund Freud so much, because she's a Freudian field dream in terms of his arguments that the greater the sexual suppression and repression, the greater we see violence. But when you say that the Jews killed JFK because he was about to ostracize Israel, when you invent all of these fabrications out of whole cloth, what is the result? The result is the demonization of Jews that leads to violence. Pierce, just 1 week ago, 2 days after Candace falsely accused me, as she has for 2 years, of being a murderer, of threatening to kill her, something for which she will face legal action, because you cannot malign a rabbi and his daughter as murderers. 2 days later, I was swatted in my house, where 5 police cars had to break into my house because Mayor Michael Wilds of Englewood, New Jersey, received an email, arguably from one of Candace's followers, after she said essentially what Henry II says: "Who will rid me of this troublesome priest?" which leads directly to the murder of Thomas Becket, who today is a Catholic saint, of course. We were swatted, and the FBI is now investigating Candace's rhetoric. They're investigating
Rabbi Shmuley, I'm interrupting because you've now
one final point.
So Candace will get exactly the same amount of time. It's up to you, but it's an opening statement, right? And what I would say... May I just say finally, if I may? Well, if it's quick,
The biggest issue I have with Candace, to be honest, is that she claims to be a Christian. Candace, didn't Jesus say you're supposed to love your enemies? Is the love you show me that you call me filth twice on the last show that you did with Pierce a piece of filth? You're supposed to love your enemies. Is that turning the other cheek? And Pierce, you're an English gentleman. I've known you for many years. You allowed her to say that without even a piece of filth. When Jesus said that you're supposed to turn the other cheek, where have you ever turned the other cheek? When Jesus said that the meek shall inherit the earth, the arrogance, the nonstop attack against Jews, the demonization. If you are a Christian, then I am the second.
Were you recently injured in a car accident? Look at this check for $160,000.
Second coming of Christ.
Okay, that's 4 minutes you've spoken to. Out of fairness, Candace, if you want to use 4 minutes to respond, you can. All I would note, Rabbi Shmuley, is you've spent 4 minutes personally attacking Candace Owens. I set this up as a debate about what is happening with the Israel-Hamas war, anti-Semitism, and so on and so on. You've turned it all completely, immediately, into an ad hominem onslaught against Candace.
How could you possibly say that? You are speaking to a woman who says the Jews are a ring of demonic pedophiles, and you're saying that I have no right to defend my people. You know, Pierce, you have to stop this once and for all. There was nothing ad hominem at all.
All right.
When Candace says that the black community
you've had your say.
is a bunch of crybabies,
okay.
everything I said was policy. I could not disagree more.
Candace will now get the same amount of time, if you wanted, Candace, to respond.
Thank you, Piers. And I don't think I really do need to respond to the ad hominem attacks. I think actually one of the things that plausibly unites people across all religions, Muslims, Jews, Christians, is that we all recognize that Rabbi Shmuley is unhinged. He's just mentally, in my view, unwell. And I don't say that as an attack. I say that as just a reality, because I've never seen someone just make things up out of thin air that were never said, and trying to screen that as a defense of black people. The black people will never accept Rabbi Shmuley after Michael Jackson put him on a list of people who he felt were ruining his life. So you can stop your pleas with Black America. They won't work. Now, going back to the context of what you've asked us to speak about today, you know, I think one of the things that the world is recognizing, and what we've always recognized, is that there are radical fringe sects that break out within every single religion, amongst every race. There's white supremacy, there's black supremacy, there's radical Islam, there are all of these Christ cults around the world. And I think right now it's important for people to understand that radical Judaism is also a thing, and you're watching an example of it right now on your screen. The person sitting across from me, or sitting next to me, I guess, it posted on his Facebook page in 2016 a tribute to someone who he said was his mentor. That was Rabbi Menachem Schneerson. He said he was his mentor and his friend. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Rabbi Schneerson, there were some Jews who believed that he was and is the Messiah. So rejecting Christ, but believing that that rabbi was his Messiah. Now, you may remember in the news recently, there was this radicalized faction of the Lubavitch Orthodox community in Brooklyn that were digging tunnels in Brooklyn and hurling benches at police officers. Well, and by the way, this is per the Times of Israel, that faction of individuals are followers of Rabbi Schneerson. So again, you have Rabbi Shmuley who believes that that's his mentor. They believed that he was the Messiah. What is it? It becomes important to understand, what did Rabbi Schneerson preach? Well, he preached Jewish supremacism, the hatred of all non-Jews. And you don't have to take my word for it, because if I said it, they would say that's anti-Semitism. You should instead take the word of the two Jewish professors who translated his work. Those authors' names were Israel Shahak and Norton Mezvinsky, and their book was entitled Jewish Fundamentalism in Israel. From that book, we learned that Shmuley's mentor, Schneerson, describes the difference between a Jew and a non-Jew. And he says, quote, "Thus we do not have a case of profound change in which a person is merely on a superior level. The body of a Jewish person is of totally different quality from the body of all nations of the world." And he talks about the substance of the Jewish body versus the substance of non-Jews, saying that the inner quality, quote, is so different and so great that the body should be considered completely different species. So that is a belief. And you can go through his speeches and you will see that he continually talks about how non-Jews should be treated, and that, again, we are a different species. This is what Rabbi Shmuley believes in. We have to come to terms with the fact that there are Jewish radicals, and it's incumbent upon the Jewish community to call them out. I'm glad that you brought up my rhetoric about Black Lives Matter, the organization, and which was basically allowing Black criminals to take to the street to burn down, to loot, and to riot in the name of racism, because it shows that I'm on equal footing here, that across the board, I do not support supremacism, whether it's coming from my community or whether or not it is coming from yours. And I think the entire world is now paying attention and wondering, what is going on in Israel? What is this government? Is this a radical fringe government? And many people are concluding that the answer to that question is yes.
Okay, those are the two opening statements. Rabbi Shmuley, let me ask you this. Where are we now with this war? Because it seems that the people inside Israel are now beginning to come after Prime Minister Netanyahu, angry that his mission to save the hostages is simply not working. We saw 6 more executed at the weekend. Obviously, that's on Hamas. But the relatives of other hostages are saying, for God's sake, bring back the hostages before it's too late. And there's no sign of any deal being done to do that. And there's a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. Is his mission statement failing?
Yes, I will answer that in just a moment. But Pierce, your guest just called me mentally unhinged. She called me filth twice on your show. You did not just say to her, Candace, can you stop the ad hominem attacks? Did I ever say anything? I stuck to policy. Can you at least just be fair and say that's unnecessary, Candace, or is this too against law?
No. You spent 4 minutes lacerating her.
Calling me mentally unhinged, is that
you're sitting there to defend that charge?
Is that ad hominem?
You spent 4 minutes attacking her personally. She's perfectly entitled
Pierce,
to return the favor.
with all due respect, when one of your guests calls someone else filth, I think that you, as an English gentleman, should step in. But let me answer your question. No less, the only thing of Christ that Candace Owens has actually fulfilled comes from Matthew chapter 10, verse 35, where Jesus says, I've come to separate and create conflict between a woman and her mother-in-law and father-in-law. My answer to your question about Gaza is that Lord Michael Farmer, a courageous British peer who happens to be Candace Owens' father-in-law, issued one of the most robust and beautiful defenses of Israel that any of us have read since October 7th. He said that, of course, there's a lot of terrible Palestinian casualties. God loves every Palestinian child as much as he loves a Jewish child. He said, but Israel has no choice but to fight this war because Hamas hides in residential areas and under nurseries. He said that Israel, the savagery of October 7th, demands a response. He said that Israel is doing exactly the right thing. And he said that he's doing all this in response to a, quote, high-profile member of his family. The contempt to not even mention his daughter-in-law, Candace Owens, because he didn't want to say her name. And he didn't even say, I love my daughter-in-law, but because the British remember Hitler, they remember the Battle of Britain, they remember the V-1 and V-2 rockets. Candace Owens has actually now said that the Nazis were the good guys and it was the allies, the British, people like yourself, Pierce, who engaged in the ethnic cleansing of 12 million people based on some documentary she watched called The Savage Peace on the BBC, which wasn't even about the Allies. She always distorts. It was about the Czechoslovakia, a country that no longer even exists. And as far as what she said about Michael Jackson, putting me on enemies list, that is a total fabrication. It was invented by someone named Dieter Wietzner, who sued Michael Jackson for $64 million, tried to shake him down, and Michael had to pay him $4 million. I worked to save Michael's life. Candace Owens never met Michael Jackson. I was his rabbi for 2 years. I love him. I missed him. I tried to get him off of drugs. She said that I killed him. And talk about the contempt for people struggling with addiction, that she would say the Jews killed Michael Jackson. And with all due respect, Pierce, you have not said that one of those things, that I'm a murderer, a man who doesn't have a speeding ticket, who doesn't have a parking ticket, is a murderer, and the police have to come and the FBI to protect me. Are you going to say...
Here's what I'm going to say to you, Rabbi Shmuley. Once again, you've just singularly failed to answer my question. So if you're just going to continue every time I ask you a question about the war, which is the point of a debate, to just launch into Candace or her family or whatever, that's your decision. But in the interest of fairness, every time you speak for 3-4 minutes, hang on. I'm now going to let Candace respond if you want to, Candace. Look, it is obviously a matter of public record that your father-in-law, Lord Farmer, did post on X what he posted. He concluded by saying, I point out I'm the Christian Deputy Chair of the Council for Christians and Jews. This was founded in 1942 as a bulwark against anti-Semitism. I mean, do you want to say anything about what your father-in-law... or posted, or anything else that Rabbi Shmuley just said?
Yeah, I'm grateful that he brought that up, and because it's very disturbing to me to see him try to pretend that my father-in-law distanced from me or said something in favor of anything that Rabbi Shmuley is saying. He would never do that. It is very important to understand that, you know, he does support Israel, and he has reaffirmed his support for Israel. And you can imagine that within any family, you have disagreements about things, but fundamentally, it's all love, and it's good for us to have these conversations. Prior to him posting the statement, I had just gotten back from vacation with him. Literally 48 hours earlier, there was something incredibly demonic about a person trying to use the Bible at the beginning of his statement, as he did, trying to quote scripture and immediately following it up by trying to pull a family apart. I mean, that is utterly unholy. And I think the question of holiness and what is holy is relevant to this discussion. I think this is a conversation that a lot of people are having as well. Look, prior to October 7th, I don't think many people were engaged with what is happening in Israel. We kind of all said the same thing. Israel is our friend and ally. I count myself among those people. Post October 7th, the world, and especially I would say Zionists in media, were demanding that we all pay attention. And when we began to pay attention, we didn't like what we saw. You cannot tell me to ever feel comfortable with 18,000 children being ruthlessly murdered. You can't get me to feel comfortable as a Christian with the amount of more explosives dropped, tons of explosives dropped on Gaza than were dropped in Hiroshima. This doesn't make sense to me. Gaza is 30 miles long, 7 miles wide. It's incredibly dense population. And this is, by the way, according to Haaretz, that 40,000 Palestinians have been murdered. I believe they're getting those numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry. And here's what I would like to say to you, Rabbi, since you're quoting scripture, okay? The one that's relevant to me is, woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness. And if you'd like to dive into a little more scripture, I think what's relevant is Revelation 3:9. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. And I'm speaking directly to you, Rabbi Shmuley. The fact that you would try to say, I am Jewish and this is what I believe, and do and say the things that you are doing. People can see and hear evil, and what you are doing right now is an act of evil. The lies that you are telling, not just on me, but also on my family members, are a good example for the world to see what we are referring to when we call something radical Zionism.
Okay, Rabbi Shmuley.
Okay, and okay, thank you. And of course, Pierce, there was nothing ad hominem about my being demonic. This is a 2 against 1 debate. I expected that. And
it's not a 2 against 1 debate.
And I will, excuse me, no, it's a 2 against 1
You've
debate.
You've made no attempt to answer my question.
No, Pierce,
Candace,
let me speak.
Has been trying to answer my question.
Candace just said,
you're not.
Candace just said, filth, demonic. There's nothing ad hominem about that. You are correct. You're right, Pierce. Candace Owens just said that Israel dropped more bombs on Gaza than on Hiroshima. Hiroshima was an atomic bomb, Candace. Why don't you just read Wikipedia? Israel has nuclear weapons. They've never used them, so I have no idea what you're talking about. Now let's look at Israel's justified defense. Israel admits, and even Hamas admits, to a 1-to-1 civilian to combatant ratio of civilian casualties, which is a tragedy. It shouldn't even be 1. But remember, Hamas fires their rockets from nurseries. The United States and Afghanistan had a 4-to-1 ratio of civilians murdered for every 1 combatant. In the Korean War, it was 5-to-1. In Iraq, it was at least 2-to-1. Israel has the lowest per capita ratio of combatants to civilians. Candace should acknowledge that. That is what we call a fact.
But you should also, hang on. You should also acknowledge then that there is a unique demographic in Gaza where of the 2 million people who live there, half of them are under 18. So that's a very different demographic to any of the other scenarios you're talking about. That is what's caused so much international opprobrium against Israel, is the fact that so many children, pro rata in the civilian death count, have been killed. It's that people are so exercised about, and rightly, because what's happened here is obvious. Hamas, yes, they've embedded themselves in civilian territory. Yes, they've built all these tunnels. None of these things are to be disputed. But the problem with going after Hamas in the way that Israel has been doing is that the collateral damage, as they would put it, to so many thousands of children has now tested the patience of the world to a degree that vast quantities of the world are against it and want this to stop. That's the reality.
I think that's a very fair question. And I don't like whataboutism. But Candace Owens never spoke out once against Bashar al-Assad, who killed 600,000 Arabs, and he actually gassed to death children. He targeted them with mustard and poison gas. You remember that President Obama said that's a red line, and then he gave it to Putin to get rid of those weapons of mass
which was
destruction.
completely
God bless
wrong,
President Trump, who actually, wait, just a second. President Trump, God bless him, actually fired 59 cruise missiles when Assad did that. It's funny because people say that President Trump is anti-Muslim. He's the only one who protected Muslim life. Pierce, Hamas has ruled since 2006. They won an election jointly with the PA. They took the Palestinian Authority representatives and threw them off of rooftops. They then subjected the Palestinians, 1.5 million Palestinians of Gaza, to the most ruthless persecution that we've ever seen. They stole all their money. Ismail Haniyeh, who was assassinated in Tehran, is worth $4 billion. Now he's fighting with Erdogan, his kids, over who's going to inherit that. Khalid Mashal is worth $3 billion. You and I both know that the Palestinians of Gaza got triple the amount per capita, prorated for our times, of the Marshall Plan. All of that money was stolen to build tunnels. There isn't one bomb shelter. The reason why people are dying in Gaza is because that money was used to buy penthouses in Doha, Qatar. There isn't one bomb shelter from Hamas. Hamas shoots and murders anyone who challenges their authority. They were elected in 2006 to a 4-year term. It's now 20 years later. Hamas specifically, and that's why they're being condemned by the Palestinians right now. They want Palestinian children to die because the more they die, the more you will condemn me and Israel. But let's remember, Pierce, your parents are part of the greatest generation. Winston Churchill was told by the Americans, don't bomb German cities, Hamburg, Dresden, etc., at night. You can't see what you're bombing. Do what we Americans have, which is precision daytime bombing. And Churchill said, no, my pilots are more important. We need the RAF.
All right.
And he flattened German cities. And he is considered today the greatest British statesman of the 20th century.
By the way, the flattening of cities like Dresden was widely condemned at the time, including by many people in Britain, and led to the establishment of the Geneva Convention.
Dresden was the last month of the war, but before that, Hamburg and everything else was not condemned.
It led to the establishment of the Geneva Convention after World War II, specifically to stop that kind of thing happening again. So I'm glad you raised that example. Candace, you've got over 3 minutes.
So do you condemn Winston Churchill as a war criminal for Dresden?
No, absolutely not. No.
Why not? You just said that it was wrong.
I was
Winston Churchill as a war criminal for Dresden.
Well,
please, you said not, but why?
If you're both going to ask me the same question, let me be clear. Winston Churchill was not a war criminal, right? But some of the ways that
Why not? He bombed Dresden and killed 25,000 people.
Yeah, he also saved the world from Adolf Hitler and the Nazis.
Oh, he saved the world. So Israel's saving the Middle East from Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Iran.
But it's not, though.
Hezbollah.
Israel's not doing that.
Thank you for answering my question. Well, case closed.
All right, let me go to Candace.
If I could just interject here, just to respond to that, I was going to say exactly what you said, Pierce. Like, Dresden was considered a Holocaust. It was, in fact, a war crime. And there should be debates about what happened in Dresden. It was absolutely horrific that a bunch of Christians were skipping off, on the eve of Ash Wednesday, and then they were quite literally reduced to ashes. It is wrong. And the fact that you are having to reference a war crime to justify what's happening in Gaza is not a point for you. It's completely awful. When people say, oh, well, look at what we did. Look at all these other horrific things we did. Why do you care about this horrible thing that's happening? I don't even understand that logic. It's completely ridiculous. Look, there is no person in good conscience who should be comfortable with the amount of death that's happening in Gaza. And yes, if you are going to correlate it to Dresden, that would be a fair comparison, except much more has been dropped on Gaza than was dropped in Dresden. So is it fair to call what's happening in Gaza a Holocaust? Is that what we're looking after when you have this nonstop onslaught? And it's completely ridiculous to say, oh, well, this is happening because of Hamas. Let's be very clear. It is happening because the Israeli government will not stop bombing them, okay? So you had a very sympathetic audience all around the world, myself included, when October 7th happened. There was not a single person that should or could justify the terrorist acts that was enacted by Hamas. But the collective punishment that is being assigned to the Gazans, the Palestinians living in Gaza, is also unacceptable, and the entire world should condemn it, and it should be made to stop. And I do believe that a radical fringe has taken hold of Israel, and further evidence of that, by the way, is that we are not even allowed to critique Israel without having people like Rabbi Shmuley, which I never said he threatened to murder me, but he has threatened me for 2 years, essentially trying to bully people into their belief that they have a right.
You never said that I threatened to murder you? We're going to post
No, I
every
never
time
said that you threatened to murder me. Don't cut me off. I did not cut you off.
Okay, I will
I did
not
not cut you off.
Go ahead,
I did not cut you off. Okay.
Go ahead.
The